30 years have passed since a diminutive girl with a fierce intellect and telekinetic powers stepped out of the shadows of her neglectful home and into the hearts of audiences around the globe. In 1996, the film adaptation of Roald Dahl's Matilda did more than just translate a beloved children's book to the screen. It created a cultural touchstone. It was a film that respected the darkness of Dahl's worldview while wrapping it in a warm, stylized, and deeply funny aesthetic. But while the movie itself has remained frozen in time, a perfect artifact of 1990s family cinema, the lives of the people who brought it to life have been anything but static. As we look back at the cast of Matilda from the vantage point of 2026, the reality of their trajectories is far more complex, surprising, and emotionally resonant than any scripted narrative. The truth about where these actors ended up is a fascinating tapestry of intentional exits, hidden battles, remarkable career pivots, and enduring legacies. At the center of the storm was, of course, Mara Wilson. When she portrayed Matilda Wormwood, she was already a veteran of the screen, having captured audiences in Mrs. Doubtfire and Miracle on 34th Street. She was the quintessential child star of the mid-90s, possessing a rare combination of precocious talent and genuine childhood innocence. However, the reality behind the scenes was deeply painful. During the production of Matilda, Mara's mother, Susie Wilson, was losing her battle with breast cancer. She passed away before the film was released, leaving 9-year-old Mara to navigate the overwhelming machinery of Hollywood fame while processing the most profound grief of her life. In retrospect, the film's set became a refuge for her, a place of routine and adult care in a world that had suddenly fractured. Yet, as Mara transitioned into adolescence, the sanctuary of the film's set turned into a cage. The industry that had celebrated her as a cute child had no idea what to do with a normal, grieving teenager. She found herself being offered diminishing returns in terms of quality roles, and the public's perception of her became increasingly invasive and uncomfortable. Rather than subjecting herself to the typical child star downward spiral, Mara made a conscious, radical choice. She walked away. By her early teens, she had largely retired from on-screen acting. What followed was not a tragic fade into obscurity, but rather a brilliant reinvention. She attended New York University, honed her craft as a writer, and embraced the theater world. By 2026, at 38 years old, Mara Wilson is recognized not as a former child actor clinging to past glory, but as a formidable essayist, playwright, and mental health advocate. Her 2016 memoir, Where Am I Now?, laid bare the unglamorous realities of early fame, OCD, and anxiety. Today, her selective voice acting roles, such as her memorable turn in BoJack Horseman, and her sharp, insightful writing have cemented her as an intellectual force. She has successfully reclaimed her narrative, proving that the most rebellious thing a former child star can do is simply grow up on their own terms. The architect of Matilda's cinematic world was Danny DeVito. It is easy to forget, amidst the chaos of the Wormwood household, that DeVito was not merely playing the sleazy, dishonest car salesman Harry Wormwood. He was the driving creative force behind the entire project. He directed, produced, and narrated the film, infusing it with his distinct visual sensibility. DeVito understood intrinsically that to do justice to Roald Dahl, the film could not be sanitized. He allowed the menace of Miss Trunchbull to feel genuinely terrifying and let the satire of the Wormwoods cut deep. Off-screen, his role was entirely different. Alongside his then-wife Rhea Perlman, DeVito became a protective figure for the young Mara Wilson, providing a layer of emotional safety that she desperately needed during her mother's illness. The man who played the worst father in cinematic history was, ironically, a vital source of paternal stability during a tragic time. In 2026, Danny DeVito is 81 years old and remains an absolute titan of American entertainment. His later career resurgence as the chaotic, morally bankrupt Frank Reynolds on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia introduced him to an entirely new generation, proving his comedic genius is truly timeless. Yet, for those who look closely, Matilda remains perhaps his most personal directorial achievement, a strange, dark, and beautiful film that only he could have made. Playing alongside DeVito as the gloriously oblivious Zinnia Wormwood was Rhea Perlman. Perlman was already a comedy royalty thanks to her iconic, Emmy-winning run as Carla Tortelli on Cheers. In Matilda, she brought a masterclass in comedic timing, portraying a woman so consumed by bingo and her own superficial desires that she fails to notice the extraordinary nature of her own daughter. Perlman never played Zinnia as a caricature. She played her as a profoundly flawed but deeply real human being, which made the character's neglect all the more impactful. The on-screen dynamic between Perlman and DeVito was electrifying, partly because it was rooted in decades of real-life romantic history. The couple married in 1982, and though they experienced highly publicized separations over the years, they never officially divorced, maintaining a deeply intertwined family life centered around their 3 children. In a beautiful full-circle moment, their daughter, Lucy DeVito, has followed them into the acting profession. By 2026, Rhea Perlman's legacy is secure not just as a television pioneer, but as an actress who brought immense heart and humor to a film about the desperate need for adults to see children clearly. If the Wormwoods represented the failure of adulthood, Embeth Davidt's Miss Honey represented its quiet redemption. For millions of children, Miss Honey was the ultimate comfort, a gentle, observant teacher who recognized Matilda's brilliance and offered her the unconditional love she lacked at home. Davidt's played the role with a fragile, luminous grace that has lingered in the cultural consciousness for 3 decades. What many viewers did not realize at the time was that Davidt's was already an accomplished dramatic actress, having delivered a devastating, haunting performance as Helen Hirsch in Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List. Her ability to pivot from the horrors of the Holocaust to the whimsical, emotional core of a children's film spoke volumes about her range. Following Matilda, Davidt's built a steady career in prestigious projects like Mad Men, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and Bridget Jones's Diary. However, her life took an unexpected turn when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. The experience stripped away her illusions about the industry and her place within it. As she fought the disease and dealt with the grueling physical toll of chemotherapy, her desire to act began to wane, replaced by a desire to tell stories from behind the camera. Drawing on her own childhood experiences growing up in South Africa during the apartheid era, she stepped into the role of writer and director. Her feature directorial debut, an adaptation of Alexandra Fuller's memoir Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight, premiered in 2024 to critical acclaim. In 2026, at the age of 60, Embeth Davidtz is a cancer survivor and a newly minted, highly respected filmmaker. There is a profound poetic symmetry to this. The woman who played the teacher who freed a child's mind has, in her 60s, finally freed her own creative voice. Of course, no discussion of Matilda is complete without confronting the towering, terrifying figure of Agatha Trunchbull. Pam Ferris delivered one of the most authoritative, physically imposing villain performances in the history of family cinema. Ferris, a veteran Welsh actress, did not play Trunchbull as a cartoonish joke. She played her as a genuine tyrant, a dictator ruling Cruncham Hall with an iron fist and a deep, visceral hatred of childhood. Ferris committed to the role so completely that she actually sustained a serious hand injury during the infamous scene where Trunchbull swings a young girl by her pigtails, requiring hospital treatment. She made the character entirely her own, standing in stark contrast to the subsequent stage and 2022 musical film adaptations, which cast men in the role. Ferris proved that female rage and physical dominance could be just as terrifying, if not more so, on screen. Remarkably, Ferris then went on to traumatize an entirely different generation of children just a few years later by playing the monstrous Aunt Marge in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the woman who is quite literally inflated and floated away. Between terrorizing magical and telekinetic children, Ferris enjoyed a highly respected career in British drama, appearing in period pieces like Middlemarch and beloved modern shows like Gavin and Stacey. Her role as the no-nonsense sister Evangelina in Call the Midwife reminded audiences of her profound dramatic depth. As of 2026, at 77 years old, Pam Ferris is returning to the Call the Midwife universe, proving that her formidable presence on screen has lost none of its power. Among the children in Matilda's classroom, one character stood out for his sheer, stubborn defiance, Bruce Borgtrotter. Played by Jimmy Cars, the scene where Bruce is forced to consume an entire colossal chocolate cake in front of the entire school is a masterclass in cinematic tension and eventual, triumphant rebellion. What begins as a sadistic punishment orchestrated by Miss Trunchbull slowly morphs into an act of collective student solidarity, culminating in a cheering room and a vomit-covered, victorious child. It is one of the most iconic scenes of the 1990s. What makes Jimmy Carr's story so compelling in 2026 is where his life went after the cake was eaten. He did not chase the fleeting high of child stardom. Instead, he walked away from Hollywood and embarked on a rigorous, deeply demanding academic journey. Carr graduated from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine in 2017, earning his degree as a doctor of osteopathic medicine. Today, at 42 years old, Dr. Jimmy Carr is a practicing physician. The juxtaposition is almost too perfect to be real. The boy famous for gorging on junk food on screen grew up to dedicate his life to healing bodies and promoting health in real life. His story is a brilliant, refreshing anomaly in the often tragic anthology of child actors, demonstrating that it is entirely possible to take a single, massive pop culture moment and use it as a stepping stone to a profoundly grounded, private, and meaningful adult life. Bruce had the cake, but Matilda had lavender. Kiami DeVale played Matilda's fiercely loyal best friend, the brave little girl who slipped a newt into the Trunchbull's water pitcher. It was DeVale's first ever acting role, and she brought a spunky, irrepressible energy to the film that perfectly balanced Mara Wilson's more reserved, introspective Matilda. After a few more acting gigs in the late 90s and early 2000s, DeVale stepped back from the relentless glare of Hollywood, choosing instead to attend the University of Kentucky where she studied psychology and theater. In recent years, she has cautiously stepped back into the industry, taking on roles in independent thrillers and dramas, approaching the craft now as a mature adult rather than a child commodity. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of DeVale's story in 2026 is her enduring relationship with Mara Wilson. The two girls who played best friends on screen in 1996 have remained best friends in real life for 30 years. In an industry built on fleeting connections and manufactured camaraderie, their friendship is a testament to genuine human bonding. For Mara Wilson, who has been so vocal about the deep loneliness and isolation of child stardom, having Kiami DeVale by her side, someone who remembers the weirdness, the pressure, and the grief of that specific time, has been an invaluable anchor. It proves that sometimes the most important thing a movie can give you is not a career, but a lifelong friend. Lurking in the periphery of the Wormwood family's criminal exploits were the bumbling FBI agents, one of whom was played by the legendary Paul Reubens. Long before he sat in that surveillance van opposite Matilda's house, Reubens had created Pee Wee Herman, one of the most influential and original comic characters in American history. In Matilda, his presence is brief, but his distinct, oddball cadence makes the scene unmistakably his. Reubens was a comedic genius who influenced generations of performers. However, when Reubens passed away in July 2023 at the age of 70, the public learned a secret he had kept hidden for 6 agonizing years. He had been battling acute myelogenous leukemia and metastatic lung cancer. He had undergone treatment, continued to work, made public appearances, and never once burdened the public with his suffering. A statement released posthumously included a heartfelt apology for keeping his illness a secret. Looking back at his role in Matilda in 2026, that brief appearance carries a heavy, melancholic weight. The man who brought so much absurd, unapologetic joy to the world was, during that exact time, carrying a devastating private burden. His quiet dignity in the face of death has added a profound layer of respect to his already monumental legacy. Finally, there is the quietest, yet perhaps most symbolically important adult in Matilda's journey, Mrs. Phelps, the local librarian. Played by Jean Spiegel Howard, Mrs. Phelps is the first adult outside of Miss Honey who recognizes Matilda's hunger for knowledge. She doesn't question why a 4-year-old is walking to the library alone. She simply hands her a book. It is a tiny role, but it is the spark that ignites the entire story. Howard, a working character actress for decades, brought a gentle, unassuming warmth to the part. What many do not know is that Jean Spiegel Howard was the matriarch of one of Hollywood's most powerful families, the mother of director Ron Howard and actor Clint Howard, and the wife of actor Rance Howard. She appeared in many of her son Ron's films, but her turn as the librarian in Matilda remains uniquely special. She passed away